So my favorite example of the benefit of community microgrids is Blue Lake Rancheria. It was, let's see, I think it was built maybe in 2018. In 2019, during, they were in PG&E's territory, and there was a PSPS and wildfires. And when the power went off all around them in Humboldt County, the Blue Lake invited the community in and actually saved 4 lives. And these were people who had medical devices that they really needed to charge. So that's really one of my favorite examples of what a microgrid can do.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 3-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much.
The clean energy industry is moving fast. The deals are getting bigger, the technology is evolving, and the stakes have never been higher. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour, the podcast for solar, storage, and microgrid professionals who want to stay ahead of it all. Each week, your host, Tim Montague, industry advisor and president of Clean Power Consulting Group, brings you unfiltered conversations with the leaders actually building the energy transition. Now, here's your host, Tim Montague.
When the grid goes down in a storm or a fire, the communities that survive intact are the ones that planned ahead, not by stockpiling fuel, by building microgrids. Lisa Cohn has covered energy for 3 decades. She runs Microgrid Knowledge, and she tracks every community microgrid being built in America right now. What she's seeing tells us a lot about where this industry is going and who's getting left behind. This is the Clean Power Hour. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you. Nice to talk, Tim. So I've been writing about energy issues for 3 decades. And when we started Microgrid Knowledge, it wasn't Microgrid Knowledge. It was something about energy efficiency. And we kept seeing these microgrids pop up. And at the time, it was called solar and storage, which was like 10 years ago. And we just thought that they were going to grow. And we ended up forming Microgrid Knowledge.
So I think of microgrids as a way to earn, save, protect in the language of intelligent generation. You can earn money with a battery, providing grid services, right? That is a cash machine. You can save money by attacking capacity charges or demand charges, which fall under the umbrella of demand charges. Most energy professionals just call them demand charges. But depending on the geography, here in Illinois, we attack capacity charges, not so much demand charges. In California, you attack demand charges. And then you protect. So it's earn, save, protect. With a microgrid, you provide a level of resiliency. The theory is simple. The real world proof is harder to come by. Lisa has been tracking the projects that actually got built, and she starts with one that saved lives.
Well, so my favorite example of the benefit of community microgrids is Blue Lake Rancheria. It was, let's see, I think it was built maybe in 2018. In 2019, during, they were in PG&E's territory, and there was a PSPS and wildfires. And when the power went off all around them in Humboldt County, um, the Blue Lake invited the community in and actually saved 4 lives. And these were people who had medical devices that they really needed to charge. So that's really one of my favorite examples of what a microgrid can do.
Yes, it can save lives. And that is something that we want. And as the weather gets weirder and the storms, fires, floods, droughts, etc., increase in frequency and knock out the grid, sometimes for only a couple of hours. Sometimes it's a rolling blackout, right? And then sometimes it's several days of not having any power. And then you're super grateful if you have solar and battery, right? Because then you can actually have some semblance of the ordinary life that you had while you had grid power running off grid. But what is the future, I guess, in your mind of a smarter, better way of building out the grid in a way that gives us, in addition to grid power, gives us resilience?
Well, so local power is something that a lot of people are talking about, the advantages of building just with local power that goes to the distribution system, the local distribution system. And that's what microgrids do. So they may use solar that's on a roof and a battery that's on that's in a different building. And you don't have to worry about transmission so much. You don't always have to worry about transmission. So if you could build it kind of from the ground up locally, that's one of the big advantages. And a lot of people are talking about, building the grid with a series of microgrids, or they talk about rebuilding Puerto Rico with a series of microgrids.
Building from the ground up with local power sounds straightforward. It is not. The biggest obstacle is not technology. It is not even money, though money is close. The first obstacle is control. Who owns a community microgrid? Who operates it? And who benefits from it are questions that utilities and regulators have been fighting over for years. In California, that fight produced two very different programs.
Well, the environmentalists and the folks who don't like utilities so much would say that they just want control. And a great example is PG&E's, let's see, what was the name? First microgrid program. Right now they have the MIP, which is pretty good, but they have the CMEP program, which basically, offered communities some help, some technical help for front of the meter microgrids, but it didn't really, it basically gave the utilities in California total control over the microgrids. So it couldn't be something that was, locally controlled. And under CMEP, I think they can only run when there's an outage. So it doesn't really take advantage of them.
Yeah. I don't know anything about CMEP, but Craig and others recently on the show have talked about the MIP, the Microgrid Incentive Program.
Right.
And that program does seem to have some good bones, right? If you're a commercial off taker, you can become part of a community scale microgrid. You get free, for all intents and purposes, free solar and batteries on the front end. And then you also get some ability to have off-grid operation. What is your critique, I guess? What are the strengths and weaknesses of the MIP?
Well, I think that people are much much happier with the MIP program. And I think, let's see, the examples that I have, and you talked to Craig, he's got a lot of the MIP microgrids either up and running or on their way. They've got the Goleta Load Pocket one, and that's obviously they're in California. And then they've got the Santa Barbara Unified School District microgrid. And I think these provide a lot more help for the people who are building them than the CMAP program.
Even with better policy, the funding problem does not go away. The MIP helps. It doesn't solve the CapEx challenge that every community faces when they try to get a microgrid off the ground. Lisa has tracked what separates the projects that get built from the ones that do not.
Well, first of all, it is very difficult to fund community microgrids, and the ones that are actually being built get help. I mentioned the Blue Lake Rancheria that was funded by the California Energy Commission, and then there's also the Redwood Coast Airport microgrid. Are you familiar with that?
No.
And that was under PG&E's Community Microgrid Enablement Program, and that got a lot of money. It got $5 million from the California Energy Commission and $6.5 million in lowest interest loans from USDA. That's a really well-known community microgrid. But without that funding, it's hard to get them up and going. I'm seeing a lot of tribal microgrids. I'm writing about one in a tribe in Wisconsin that has put up a couple of microgrids, and they have gotten funding through the DOE's tribal program. So what I'm seeing is, community microgrids that get funding. I can give you a great example of one that wasn't funded. There was a group of seniors in California who wanted a microgrid because they had a lot of vulnerable residents, and they tried everything to raise money, to get involved in PG&E's programs, and in the end, they just gave up. I believe that the state has set aside money for microgrids, and that's why we're seeing so many in Maryland. So again, it really depends on the funding. Sometimes these are not community microgrids, but commercial microgrids, they have demand response. They have a lot of ways to make some money with the value stack. It's not always so easy with community microgrids. So a lot of it depends on the money, right?
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. So the projects that get built are the ones that secure funding, whether from the state, the DOE, or a creative utility partnership. That last category is worth paying attention to. Some utilities are not waiting for legislation. They are building new models right now that make community microgrids possible without a large upfront capital ask from the community itself.
So an interesting model is here in Oregon. Portland General Electric will help customers buy batteries, or they will borrow customers' batteries and solar. And say in Beaverton, they use that model where they helped with the battery, and then Beaverton already had the solar, and that created a community microgrid. So we are seeing some, different models that the utilities are using.
Do you see any patterns, though, in terms of like public power, the munis and co-ops versus the investor-owned utilities?
Well, yeah, I think the public power is much more open to doing microgrids, and they don't have as many rules around them. So another story I'm working on right now is about a tribe it's about a tribe that's served by a muni, a public power utility, and they don't have to worry about the over the fence rule. Yeah. Because they're not being served by an investor-owned utility. So that makes it much easier for them to create a community microgrid, right? Because it can serve more than one property.
And explain the over the fence rule, if you would.
The over the fence rule says that unless you have to be a utility in order to serve more than one meter.
Mm.
But we're seeing it on tribal property where, often the IOUs don't really have any say in what's going on, and or sometimes they'll build their own infrastructure so that they can, distribute the power to their microgrids.
Public power utilities are closer to their customers than IOUs. That is structural. They are owned by the people they serve. But proximity alone does not build microgrids. It takes organizations on the ground doing the design work, navigating the regulatory environment, and pushing projects from concept to construction. In California, one nonprofit has been doing exactly that, and Lisa names them by name.
Well, as I understand it, public power utilities respond to the wants of the people who they're serving, and they'll often ask them what they want. And often the answer is, we want more clean power.
Mm.
So I see a lot of that. Like here in Oregon, we've got Eugene Water and Electric Board, which is known as being a pretty green utility. It's a public utility that focuses a lot on clean power. So they're responding to what the folks want. And if they want resilience, I'm sure that's something that gets worked into the equation.
And do you have any sense of where we are on that journey to getting clean energy and resiliency to the munis and co-ops in America?
Well, that's an interesting question. So a lot of them purchase power. They usually don't have their own generating resources, or sometimes they do, but more often they purchase power. So if they can secure a contract with a solar company, and a lot of them do, that's one way to get the clean energy up and running. But they often, not always, but they often don't own their own generating resources.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear a lot from of public power utilities who say, oh, we're up to 50, 60% clean power. And it's through purchases usually.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'll own a part of a solar plant, but I haven't seen a lot of that. Well, there are other groups like the Clean Coalition, environmental groups that get involved in communities and helping to deploy microgrids. You see them involved a lot. But Clean Coalition is really doing a great job. They have so many microgrids going up right now. And as I understand it, they design them, right? They do the design.
Yes.
And they work with the communities.
And they're a nonprofit.
Right. That's a really good model. Having them, do the design, work with the communities, serve as a nonprofit, and they're really going for it.
The MIP program that makes Clean Coalition's work possible today did not come easily. It emerged from years of complaints about what came before it. Lisa walks me through how that policy fight unfolded.
California tried to come up with a microgrid incentive, and that led to the CMAP program. Well, basically, after a lot of back and forth, the PUC decided to base it on the CMAP, which people weren't very happy with because that does not allow you to run your microgrid all the time. It's only when you need it during outages. So there was a lot of pushback about that. And I think perhaps what came out of that and the complaints about it was the MIP program, which provides more help.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to get a value for these assets, right? If you can't use them every day, it just doesn't make any sense, right? It's a both and. You want to be able to use them every day and when the grid goes down.
Right. So under the MIP program, I don't think there's that restriction. Most of the Clean Coalition microgrids I've seen are not restricted in that way.
Yeah.
They can run, 24/7. And that's really important because then you can provide grid services and you can do demand response. You can do much more than just resilience.
State legislation is creating the conditions for community microgrids to grow. The next step is connecting them. What happens when individual microgrids can share power with each other? Lisa calls this networked microgrids, and there are already examples in the field.
Like here in Oregon, there were two bills passed recently. And I mean, you were talking about state, right? State incentives. There were two bills passed recently to move microgrids forward, especially community microgrids in these areas of Oregon that are subject to wildfires. Um, and those local incentives, those state incentives, I mean, they make a big difference. I think that must be what's happening where you are. So there's an interesting project in California where they want to, it's again a tribal project where they want to network the microgrids, which is a really cool idea that we haven't really discussed. And that's what's happening in the Bronzeville, right? Because the Bronzeville microgrid is tied to the ITT microgrid. And when they can back each other up, they become even more powerful.
The IIT, the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Yeah, I couldn't pull that one out of my head.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? They're in close physical proximity. Is that what you're referring to, though? Like communities that are in close physical proximity?
Right. And if they each have a microgrid, they can back each other up. They can send power to each other if they're networked. Now, we haven't seen a lot of that except in Bronzeville, but I've seen a lot of proposals to do that.
Yeah.
Network the microgrids.
I was talking with a gentleman from the Chattanooga utility recently, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they had a rolling blackout a couple of years ago where the TVA, the grid operator in the region, said, look, locals, meaning munis and co-ops, you're going to have rolling blackouts. We're going to cut you off for a couple of hours at a time, and we want you to load shed. And the way they've responded to that event is by installing 5 megawatt hour batteries. They're installing the batteries at substations. So there's existing infrastructure, which makes a lot of sense, right? There's a big pipe there. And when I think of the grid, that machine, right? If we just retrofitted in batteries and solar, if you have land or big roofs around your facility, that substation or near that substation, right? That is kind of the next level grid, truly. If you had batteries and solar just added on to those hotspots.
Right, and I think that's something that PG&E is doing. I think they talk about substation microgrids. And I do hear a fair amount about that, these efforts, especially in rural areas where folks are at the very end of the line. They want to get a microgrid in there to provide the resilience. And sometimes they say, we'll do it from the substation.
All right. Well, we didn't get to talk about data centers. We'll have to save that conversation for another discussion, because I know that you're writing a lot about data centers and it's on everybody's minds.
Right. And you know that in Oregon, a law just passed saying that they have to pay for their share of energy costs. And they put all the data centers on a special rate that is now going to increase by 29%.
Hey, guys. Are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial, but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. Community microgrids are not a niche technology anymore. They are the infrastructure model that survives what is coming: storms, fires, grid overload, and a generation of energy demand that the existing system was not built to handle. The projects being built right now in California, Oregon, Wisconsin, Maryland, and Illinois are proof that the model works. What they need is funding, legislation, and partners willing to do the design work alongside communities. If you are an EPC, a developer, or an energy professional who works with commercial and industrial customers, this market is going to be in front of you sooner than you think. You can find Lisa Cohn at cleanenergywriters.com. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.